from the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal. This is All Things with Kim Strassel.
All eyes these days are on the economy, and those are the moments to talk with economists. Welcome to All Things with Kim Strassel, and not only do I have an economist to speak to this week, I have the famous grumpy economist, otherwise known as John Cochrane, Senior Fellow of the Hoover Institution at Stanford, Adjunct Scholar of the Cato Institute, and writer of the Grumpy Economist on Substack. Welcome, John, and just explain to listeners, those who may have never met you before, that you actually aren't grumpy in real life, are you?
No, I'm not. And thank you for your faith in economists. I'm generally a happy guy unless I, by mistake, put down the Wall Street Journal and read the New York Times op-ed page. That's what got me my nickname.
I like that. I'm going to go with that story. It's a good one. Well, let's start with an easy one. What is the state of the U.S. economy, do you think? And I ask you this because when I look out there, I ask a lot of the people that in the past I have always turned to say, where do you think we're headed? And a lot of them are honestly a little flummoxed. They see indicators pointing in all different directions. So I wanted to get your take. Is our economy strong? Is it weak? It's verging on recession. What do you see when you look out there?
I see pretty good in conventional macroeconomic terms. I see underlying structural issues that I would love to see fixed so that we could grow more over the long run. You know, crazy tax system, spending that doesn't very useful, lots of regulation, cost bloat, and so forth. And then we got the tariffs coming. If this tariff business goes through, I do think it'll be quite damaging to the economy.
Yeah, and I do want to get to tariffs, but let's tackle some of those other things you mentioned first, our structural problems. We obviously have a new president. Hard to not notice that on a minute-by-minute basis. And I'm wondering, when you look at what Donald Trump has announced so far, different pieces of his agenda, at least those that could be managed from an executive perspective. We'll get to the reconciliation bill in a minute, but in terms of what the administration itself is doing, what are you seeing that you think will be most helpful to the economy?
Lots of things. And that's where actually I was quite hopeful for the administration. You know, day one, we're not going to follow Europe over self-imposed energy suicide.
Right.
That's nice. Day one, we're going to allow nuclear energy. We're not going to turn the lights off. On policies that do nothing to actually help climate, if you're worried about climate, they just deindustrialize your countries. Day one, that was pretty nice. We're not going to regulate AI to death while it's still in the cradle. Also Europe's problem. Great. We're not going to overregulate like crazy. That kind of thing is very hopeful. Not so much for recessions and business cycles, but for the more important question of really good long-term growth. That was the good stuff. Then, of course, the tariffs, I think, are the first self-imposed wound that puts all that in danger. And partly it's in danger because, as you said, things were being done under executive order. And the tariffs are done under a declaration of national emergency. That sort of thing doesn't last unless it's converted into a strong economy, political support, and let's make it permanent through proper legislation and sorts of things. That's also, I think, now in danger.
Explain a little bit to listeners, because I make this point all the time, but you will do it far more eloquently and with an economist's credentials behind it as well, too. Just how important the energy piece is to an economy, because I'm always trying to make the point that energy in many ways is a sort of lifeblood of economic function. And if you are blessed enough, which this country is, to have a lot of resources for energy production, it could just have an enormous boon to economic growth, but only if you unleash it.
Yes, I don't know if I can ever match you, Kim, for eloquence,
No.
But I'll try. Or for detailed knowledge of the facts, which I've always admired in your writing. Yes, so much of what we do depends on energy. You might not notice in your own life, although all of us need to drive around and all of us need to keep the lights on and the heat. And I'm in Texas today, the air conditioning, those are all kind of useful things. But it's just vital to an industrial economy to have plenty of reliable, abundant, and cheap energy. And, like the lights went out in Spain over the last couple of days. That sort of thing makes it very difficult. And many industrial companies are just leaving Germany. They can't get the electricity they need, so off they go. It is the foundation of everything we've done since the steam engine has been about harnessing energy. You want to go back to hoeing your farmland by hand or with horses? Good luck to you.
Well, those of us who are hobby gardeners, we kind of like our hoes. But yeah, I think on a mass production scale, that's not the most efficient way to go.
The hobby garden is great. And if we all have to do it that way, then we're all immensely poor.
Exactly. Yeah. I have never been able to. I think a lot of people also miss this point, especially a lot of those that have been out there in the prior administration banging on about the need to electrify everything. What you just said about the industrial manufacturing base, I think a lot of people don't understand that the machines that produce a lot of other machines, all the kind of hardcore manufacturing, you need a lot of heat, and you can't actually make those things work with renewable energy or electricity. You've got to have good old-fashioned fossil fuels. And it does strike me that the Trump administration understands that if its goal is to revive, and I have some issues with this goal, but if the goal is to dramatically revive domestic manufacturing, you have to have energy to do it.
And even if you want to be on the forefront of AI, you need energy to do it. Now, electricity is actually fine, but where does it come from? I live in the People's Republic of California, where they are mandating electrifying everything. But guys, on the margin, our electricity still comes from burning fossil fuels like everyone else's. And those solar panels come from burning a lot of coal in China. So electricity, while you can use it for many, many things, it's got to come from somewhere. And for the moment, that's fossil fuel. Nuclear would be lovely, and stuff also that runs at night and when the wind isn't blowing.
You also get it, I just have to throw in there, by stealing it from a lot of other states. I would just like to notice that.
Yeah.
To add to the sins of the People's Republic of California. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more with John Cochrane. Welcome back. I am here with John Cochrane from Hoover, the grumpy economist. What about DOGE? What's the economist's view of DOGE? I know that you mentioned spending as a structural problem. I applaud deeply what Elon Musk has been doing, mostly because it's the first time in a long time that anybody, and in decades, that anybody is taking a real hard look under the jalopy hood and seeing all the ugly and rot that's in there. And I think that that's a useful exercise. I am less certain what it would mean in the long run for actually cutting spending in government. What's your view?
I agree. I think DOGE is not in the short run going to cut trillions of dollars of federal spending because Congress appropriates it.
Right.
And that's fundamentally where spending comes from. A lot of it is entitlements that you can't touch. But even the money, the hundreds of billions that go down rat holes of the Inflation Reduction Act and things like that, that's appropriated by Congress. DOGE is doing something very interesting. As you pointed out, small amounts of money that are being spent in wildly counterproductive ways to U.S. interests or to support political activity of people who actually hate the U.S. That's what we found out in USAID is the shocking ways this small amount of money was being spent. Not that you're going to balance the federal budget from it. And he's beginning to put some order into how things are spent. I didn't know that Treasury issued checks without linking them to a budget line.
Oh my gosh.
That's one of the little things that DOGE is doing. Now, we've had all sorts of wonderful institutions for trying to get some control of spending. The Office of Management and Budget, invented by Calvin Coolidge, the Budget Control Act, invented by Congress in the 1970s, the Department of the Treasury, the Inspectors General, the Transparency.gov. None of them seem to work. So we need to do something different. I'm delighted DOGE is at least trying it in perhaps a little bit chaotic way for the moment.
You had an absolutely wonderful piece you did recently in the last couple of months. I learned a great deal from it. I would suggest people go to your Grumpy Economist Substack and read it on USAID and development aid and what a bust that has been. Talk about that a few minutes. I think that's an example of what you're talking about, right? That this is money that's just going down the tube.
Well, the big going down the tubes of USAID was not so much even the development aid. People say, oh, the poor starving kids in Africa. USAID was funneling money to nonprofits who funnel money to a non-governmental organization who funnel money to so on and so forth. Most of it keeping high-priced political partisans in salaries in nice places. A lot of it going to support horrendous things. Like we built a cement plant in Gaza. Gee, I wonder what they did with that cement. That was USAID money. So supporting political partisan causes, that was off. But then aid itself poses a real problem. One of the things we do is we send food to poor countries. Now that sounds great. They need food. And in an emergency, that's certainly the right thing to do. But imagine the Chinese said, oh, the poor citizens of California can't afford proper rice. We will subsidize the growing of rice. We will send it to California and we'll drop it for free, thereby bankrupting all of the companies in California who made rice. Well, our aid bankrupted a lot of farmers across Africa. So it's really a two-edged sword. Our aid, we give governments money. That means those governments don't have an incentive to grow their economies and to develop democratic institutions so that they can tax their citizens. They instead learn how to get more aid from us. So it's very hard to see how outside of emergencies, getting things going, aid has really not done that much good. It hasn't been that expensive.
Good point.
People way overestimate how much money we spend on aid, but it's going in places that don't actually help.
Yeah, and I think the damage, to your point, for actually only a little amount of American spending, we can manage to do a whole lot of damage. And this is why I actually love talking to an economist, because, in Washington, everyone argues about the politics of this, the amount of spending. And what's so great talking to someone like you is you actually explain why it doesn't actually fulfill the goals that it's meant to fulfill from an economic perspective.
This is like one of the most important things. We keep saying how much we spend on X. How about asking, what do we get for the money that we're spending?
Excellent.
That goes for military spending. That goes for all sorts of things. It's not about what you spend. Look at California's tens of billions of dollars on homeless. And what did we get? More homeless. Let's talk about what you get for your money, not how much you spent on it.
Yeah, including the unintended consequences of it at times, too.
Yes, intentions don't count.
Yeah, intentions don't count. So we talked a little bit about spending. We talked a little bit about energy and production and deregulation, which is a good thing. Congress is meanwhile working on its one big beautiful bill. And by the way, I've now noticed that politicians say it really fast like that, like it's just one word, one big beautiful bill. And I wanted to talk to you in particular about the tax portion, because I know you've been thinking about this a lot. And it's such a huge aspect of growth if we want growth. Now, I'm concerned, I have to be honest, 2017 reform, it wasn't a perfect reform by any means, but it broadly hewed to the principles of broadening the base and lowering rates, which is the formula we know that should produce growth. This time around, I'd love to be seeing a continuation of that, lowering the corporate rate further eliminating loopholes, simplification. Instead, what I'm seeing, and I'd love to get your view on what you're seeing, is a huge number of additional carve-outs. No taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security. Are we going the right way with this bill? Could we be doing things much better?
I agree with you. It was a good tax reform. It was not the scale of 1986, which lowered marginal tax rates from 70 to 28%. It was not what the Kim and John would do if put in charge.
Oh, wouldn't that be great if we were in charge?
We would throw the whole damn thing out. There would be about one postcard. There would be no deductions or exclusions for absolutely everything. And there would be one very low rate. Wouldn't that be lovely?
That would be a beautiful bill.
And this is not that bill, that's for sure. But yes, what we are seeing, I think, politically, sort of what we're seeing in tariff. You throw in a very high rate and then everybody comes not asking, look, Mr. President, this isn't a great policy for the country. They're saying, that's fine, screw everybody else, but make sure I get my deduction. And that's kind of where the politics of it naturally goes until it turns into a big Swiss cheese of a monster. And we sit down and say, okay, we got to clean this stuff up now. So I hope the clean it all up, reform, lower the rates, broaden the base impulse prevails. Otherwise, we'll get high marginal rates, Swiss cheese of deductions, and lots of politicking.
Yeah, not to mention possibly, I think this idea is now dead, but I can't believe that my ears were actually hearing Republicans talking about a millionaire's tax as well, too.
There aren't enough millionaires to make a dent. And when you calculate the all-in tax rate, federal, state, local, sales, and so forth, we tax our millionaires at actually quite high marginal rates, equal to or more than Europe.
Yeah, and which comes back to the John and Kim bill. In a perfect world, obviously, we would not be taxing people on the basis of income, but by consumption, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes.
You want to tax all consumption, not just imports, and you want to tax it evenly. You do not want taxes on building factories, rates of return, and so forth. That's absolutely the way we want to go.
Well, we just have to repeal an amendment or two, and then I would feel comfortable going down that road.
Well, there are actually, there was a bill in Congress to get rid of the income tax and put in a national sales tax. So that's not a totally unheard of idea in Washington, D.C. Let's hope that America does that after we finish trying everything else.
Yeah, we'll get there maybe one day. Okay, we're going to take one more break. When we come back, more with John Cochrane.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is All Things with Kim Strassel.
Welcome back. Let's turn to those big bad tariffs. I read one of your recent postings on tariffs, and we're going to delve into economics. It's going to strain the outer limits of my economics. But you essentially make the case against tariffs really on a kind of macro level, which is that the way to look at global trade is to look beyond some of these indicators that apparently drive Donald Trump nuts, like our trade deficit, instead to the question of why do we have it? And your argument is that trade imbalance is more a symptom of a bigger structural disease, which is America's spending, a lot of which is, by the way, on entitlements and subsidies that turbocharge our own consumption of foreign goods, as well as on policies that impede our domestic production and distribution of goods that we could sell abroad. So essentially what we are doing is financing our huge budget deficits via foreigners. Do I get that right?
You got that right, and congratulations.
Thank you. Explain it a little bit more, though, to listeners.
Yeah, I'm not going to strain your economics. The economics part is easy. The right tariff is zero. The hard part is explaining why all the what-ifs and other ideas are wrong.
Okay.
One big principle to keep in mind is that when foreigners sell us something, they're not hurting us any more than when the grocery store sells you something, they're not hurting you. Follow the dollar. If the foreigners put stuff on boats and takes a piece of paper, first of all, it'd be lovely if that just ended. But no, what are dollars useful for? The only thing they're useful for is buying stuff back from the U.S. So the idea that trade deficits hurt us it's a common fallacy, but it's wrong. The hint of the problem, the overall trade deficit, not what we have with each individual country. Why is it that what they do with the dollars, is they turn around and buy American securities? So the overall trade deficit comes back to how much do we save versus invest. It's hard to understand how that is connected until you just follow the money. We give them dollars. They're either going to buy stuff from the U.S., then the net trade deficit zero, or they're going to buy U.S. securities, which means they're investing right back in the U.S. So here's what happened. China wanted to save more than it wanted to consume for whatever reason. And they don't want to invest in China for all sorts of good reasons. They want to invest in the U.S. They're getting old, they want to save for their retirement. So we take that. We could have taken the low interest rates. When they want to save, that drives down interest rates, right?
Yep.
There's more savings. That drives down interest rates. And we look at those interest rates. We could say, oh, great, low interest rates, we'll build factories. Then the factories grow, they produce more stuff, and we pay China back, which we will eventually by putting the product of those factories back on ships. By the way, we could be the ones working and putting stuff on boats in return for paper, not China. Be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. But instead, we took those low interest rates and the government funneled them into current consumption. It's like you got a credit card and the credit card says, Kim, teaser rate, 2%,
Sure.
Borrow all you want. Kim could have borrowed and set up a cappuccino shop and become a profitable business owner, or Kim could have gone shopping, and Kim went shopping. So now that investment is not a promise to pay back out of abundant U.S. factories. That investment is a promise to tax future Americans to pay it back. And we pay it back by working hard to put stuff on boats and exporting more than we import, which we'll see how much we like it when those days come.
Well, your point here, and by the way, Kim only wishes she could go shopping. She never has time to go shopping, but I guess that would make me a saver, but not by choice. So the point you're making here, and I just want to make sure I've got this right, but the real problem here is the structural issue, as you note, is our own spending addiction, our own lack of interest in saving and growing. And what it means to me, if I'm reading you right, is that, we have Donald Trump at the moment saying, well, we got to do this, and it might be kind of hard. You'll just have to kind of buckle up and hold tight and take the medicine and just be happy with your 2 Barbie dolls and your 5 pencils, because we got to do something hard here to fix the situation. But it strikes me that what you're saying is that if the country really does have to do something hard, it would make more sense to do the hard thing of addressing our spending problem, our consumption problem, and our revenue problem. Yes?
Yes, and I don't think it's that hard. The reason we consume is not some cultural problem of Americans. The reason we consume is government policy that directs us to consumption. You mentioned consumption tax. We tax investment pretty heavily. So we have explicit government policies favoring consumption. We subsidize housing and tax investments in factories. So just getting rid of that thumb on the scale would help. And yeah, you want to solve the trade deficit, the overall trade deficit, do it in a heartbeat. Balance the federal budget.
Yes.
Stop taking investment and driving it right into consumption. That will do quickly. The alternative, it's just like I gave you that great credit card and you said, good, I'm going to go off on a shopping spree with a personal shopper so I don't have to do it in time. And I said, well, I don't want that. I'm going to trip you on the way to the store and give you a bloody nose. Well, that's not very effective. Once we get to the 2 Barbie dolls and 5 pencils stage, meaning everything at Walmart is 3 times more expensive, well, about 20, 30% more expensive, and the shelves are empty, we'll see how happy Americans are. Kind of funny that President Donald Trump is with Greta Thunberg on the we need degrowth and less stuff. That's not going to last very long.
Yeah, I don't think it is.
Could I just say, trade with China has done one wonderful thing. Lower to middle America got to buy incredibly good, cheap stuff at Walmart. Don't discount that. That's made the quality of life really important for people of modest means.
Oh, I completely agree. It always still amazes me when you go back and see what was considered a good middle class lifestyle back in the 1950s or 1960s. Our levels of consumption and ease of life these days, by comparison, are just so much more remarkable.
The quality is so much more. And as far as jobs, 4% unemployment rate. Record job vacancies. Hello?
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's finish with this because, of course, and I think it's an unfair label, economists, the economic world uses as dismal science. And I have the grumpy economist here on the show. But how optimistic are you that we do, as a country, fix some of this, the tariffs go away, that we get serious about some of these problems?
Well, we're the dismal science because we point out budget constraints, meaning that you can't spend more money on everything. But we're also the optimistic science because we point the way out, and that is growth. The pie can get bigger if only you'll let the pie get bigger. I'm optimistic because I believe in America, and I think we have institutions that are correcting. We're seeing a lot of correction of the horrendous economic policies of the Biden-Harris era, and I think we will not stick with tariffs and other damaging policies that will just bring the economy to their knees. I think we're a more responsive society, and the checks and balances will come in and sunshine will come back and everything's going to be fine.
Well, I sure hope you are right. I am going to leave on that very happy note. I'm with you. I'm a fellow optimist. I want to thank you, John Cochrane, for coming on the show. We want to thank our listeners. We hope you subscribe. If you do, just hit that button. And if you'd like to write to us, you can at atkim@wsj.com.